social media has not only been harmful for journalists, but it's been harmful for democracy. It's been harmful for the world. And it is a painful moment to think that the public doesn't trust us. This democracy needs us. We're cleansing. We're the cleansing agent. We keep the country from falling into corruption.
Welcome to Redefiners, a podcast designed for daring leaders who are changing what it means to lead in today's increasingly complex world. I'm Nanas Motashami, a leadership advisor at Russell Reynolds Associates.
And I'm Clark Murphy, the former chief executive and also a leadership advisor. Naz and I have spent our careers exploring what works and what's next in the realm of leadership.
In each episode, we ask our guests deep and provocative questions about how they've challenged the norms and how they've redefined their organizations and ultimately themselves as leaders.
Also, you can answer this one question. How are you redefining your leadership?
Perhaps the boldest question yet.
Conversations that matter. Inspiration for us all, whether you're kicking off your career or crafting your legacy. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Redefiners. Today, we're going to talk with an icon and veteran of journalism, someone who has truly redefined the industry. She's covered some of the world's biggest news and events over the last 5 decades. The list really is endless. It started off with the Watergate scandal, the impeachment of President Nixon, the assassination attempt on Reagan, the Gulf War, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the list goes on and on. Clark, I have to say, I don't know who's more excited, me or my dad, who is a complete news buff. I grew up in Iran in one of the few households that had an illegal satellite. I'm not quite sure how my dad had smuggled the satellite dish, but we were able to get all the American news networks and we had them on constantly in the background. And what I distinctly remember is my parents having dinner parties where they would invite their friends over, and after dinner, they will all get together and watch pre-recorded episodes of 60 Minutes. That's how valuable it was, and that's how much we all enjoyed it. So I feel like I've grown up with our guest in my living room.
Among her many accolades, she's won 13 Emmys, a Lifetime Achievement Emmy for overall excellence in reporting. She's interviewed 9 U.S. presidents from Nixon to Trump, countless CEOs, politicians, and world leaders. And she's the author of 2 best-selling books, Reporting Live, about her work as a White House correspondent, and more recent and more personally, becoming grandma. It's very exciting for me today to introduce Lesley Stahl. Her career has been marked by political scoops, investigations, award-winning foreign reporting. Being in New York, you watch Lesley on TV, but then you see in person, Lesley has a big smile and a big laugh, and is always seemingly in a good mood when one sees her out. And then you see her grilling these famous people on television, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is serious. This is serious. Lesley, thank you for joining us on Redefiners. Welcome.
Oh, this is a great pleasure, And Anand, I've been to Iran several times, including when I was probably in my 20s. We went all over. The Shah was there, and, we were free to roam, and we went to Isfahan.
That's where I'm from.
Oh, my goodness. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful.
I am so glad you enjoyed your time there.
Yes, I have.
Fantastic. Before we go down that road too much, Lesley, would actually like to sort of start at the beginning, if we may. You've had such a long and successful career in broadcast news, and you're still covering some of the biggest news stories around. Tell us how it all started. Did you know that you wanted to be a journalist, or is it something that you fell into?
I had no idea about journalism. When I was in college, I know we had a newspaper, but I don't think we had a journalism course. Out of college, I went to graduate school. I was probably in my early 20s, and I was working for the mayor of New York, and walked into the newsroom and asked a reporter, what do you do all day? Tell me what you do. And when he finished, I had this burning urge to become a journalist, just based on what he said he did all day, which was gather information, then put it together and disseminate. And I thought, wow, how come no one told me about this? Oh, brave new world, It was like falling in love.
And did you know that you wanted to focus on the political side as opposed to other parts of journalism?
Well, while I was working for the mayor of New York, so there was already politics there. And my boyfriend in college was a politician. So yeah, I was interested in it. And my first job in journalism was at NBC News, working in their election unit. So, I entered journalism through politics.
Lesley, we ask all our guests about their redefining moments that help them become the person they are today. Was there a pivotal moment as a journalist that either propelled your career or early on defined your career?
Ages ago, I was interviewed by a group of young women who were doing a research project at Rice University. And they were trying to determine what made success that was different between men and women. Mm-hmm. And women, they told me, always talked about luck. And men never talk about luck. Men take the bull by the horns, and women feel, swept along. I feel I got in during affirmative action, which was popular back then. And so I was in the door, incredibly grateful just to be there. I just feel I was on a wave of some kind. I suppose, therefore, that the pivotal moments had more to do with the news of the day. So as you mentioned, I covered Watergate, and it was lucky that I covered Watergate. I was assigned to it. I didn't ask for it. And of course, it lasted for years. So that was my break, so to speak, but I fell into it.
And from a personal perspective, any personal redefining moments?
My husband and I had COVID at the same time, and my husband's handicapped. So we had people here around the clock. And I came home, and the nurse who was taking care of us said to me, "You are the first one of my patients to survive."
Oh, my God.
Of course, it's searing. You're the first patient I've had that survived, and it chilled me to the bone.
Right.
The whole time I had COVID and I was in the hospital with pneumonia and all of that, I never felt endangered. Never. And when I go out reporting and I get into sort of thorny, maybe dangerous situations, I never feel I'm in danger. I come home afterward, as I did from COVID, and I think, you idiot, why didn't you feel scared?
And Lesley, does something like that make you rethink priorities? I mean, dare I ask, has it made you maybe want to retire from the professional side and spend more time with the family?
I do think that having COVID changed my priorities a little bit, but never leaving my work. I mean, they're going to have to drag me out. Let's just face that. I did change my priorities in the hospital. And as Clark knows, he and I were on a board together, and I retired from the board. And it had something to do with saying, you can't do everything, Lesley. Grow up. I'm almost 80, and I'm telling myself to grow up and just reduce the field a little bit, but not my work.
And can I ask one more question before we sort of move on? So much like I am starstruck today, and we've had some amazing guests on these podcasts, but I am totally starstruck. Lesley, in your life, you have interviewed some impressive people, world leaders, CEOs, politicians, heads of state. Has it ever been a bit too much? Have you ever either been starstruck or ever emotionally affected by your conversations?
No, I haven't been starstruck, but I have been shaken emotionally. I have been kind of stopped in my tracks. And it's never with the powerful people. It's never with the names. It's never with a movie star or anything like that, or even a CEO. It's usually a doctor. The first human interest story I ever did, I did for 60 Minutes. And I interviewed a doctor with bone cancer. And he was in excruciating pain. And he was fantastic as a human being. But the story was that the only time he didn't have pain was when he was operating. He was a brain surgeon, thank goodness, and and I was overwhelmed by him. And there have been some families who are taking care of sick children that overwhelm me to the point of tears. So I don't get starstruck. Maybe a little intimidated by a general once. But
That's probably what makes you a very good interviewer.
It was Norman Schwarzkopf. Yeah, he intimidated me.
Talking about Norman and other sort of big leaders that you've interviewed, you've often had to deal with big egos, strong opinions, people who maybe have their own agenda and aren't open to sort of telling you the truth exactly how it is. And that's actually, believe it or not too dissimilar to what we do. I often find that I really need to prep before interviews and actually kind of cross-reference to really know kind of what the facts are. How have you done that? How do you prepare for interviews where you know that the person you're interviewing may not want to tell you the whole story?
Well, that's almost 100% of the time.
Is it?
Of course. And particularly with business people, and politicians as well. And both, if you're interviewing a CEO, for example, or a head of state, or even a senator, they practice. They get their staffs to try to second guess us and go through the questions they think we're going to ask and kind of school them in getting around it, because people don't say yes. They have to agree to an interview to come on 60 Minutes, obviously. And they don't agree unless they have something they want to impart, or they've been accused of something and they want to deny it. So they all have an agenda. No one comes on just to come on. I mean, I can't think of a time. And so it's a game. We know they're going to try not to answer or evade or maybe not tell the truth. And we have to prepare ourselves to push or maneuver around. For the big interviews, we spend a lot of time getting ready.
You know, it's the same when we interview some of these successful leaders. What we're trying to do is recruit successful leaders to go run another company or a foundation or a university. And so for us to be good in our jobs, we have to understand when they were not successful and how they handled it and what they did. And so you've got to keep probing for strengths and weaknesses. And there are some of our partners who are like, oh, you know, she's famous. You can't really ask her that tough question. But otherwise, we're not prepared, and we're not giving a balanced assessment to our clients about how good a leader this will be in a time of crisis or transformation. It's kind of tricky sometimes.
Yeah.
So I want to pick up on something, Lesley. You talked about affirmative hire. I've never heard you say that before. And I think you and Connie Chung and Bernard Shaw were the early affirmative hires. And then you were, I think, the first woman to serve as the CBS News White House correspondent. It has been a male-dominated industry. And we've seen some of the issues of the industry in the last couple of years. Tell us about, how did you get through the boys' club? And how did you have to swing hard elbows? Did you just perform through? Yeah. So how'd you get through it?
Well, you know, I think this will be of interest to whoever's listening. The real answer is that my boss at the time, who hired me and Connie Chung and Bernie Shaw, was totally 100% committed to affirmative action. He was not going to let us fail. And the commitment of the boss is so vital for anything to succeed. Connie, Bernie, and I all went on to basically have big careers. And he told the senior correspondents that they were to bring us along, that we were not to fail. And he also told us that if we didn't work hard, he wasn't going to stay with us. And I did work hard, and I did have sharp elbows. I did. But if he hadn't made sure that we didn't fall on our faces early, he brought us along when he thought we were ready. And so boss is everything.
I think you are absolutely spot on. We work with a lot of clients on DE&I initiatives, and one of the key sort of success factors is exactly as you said, the sponsorship needs to be there, because you can bring great diverse talent in, but if they don't have the sponsorship, the mentorship, they'll feel alienated, they won't get the opportunities, ultimately won't feel included, and they leave. So I think you are absolutely spot on.
Well, and I lived it, so I know.
And is it easier are harder. There's some first generation women that go through and say, hey, I made it, you got to make it on your own. And there are other first generation women or diverse leaders that say, I'm going to help more people than help me. What's the journalism industry like now for women or diverse talent?
I do think women are naturally good journalists. And you just see women everywhere. I thought it would happen much earlier than it did, much sooner than it did. Affirmative action came into the business world in the early 70s. And it's only in the last, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years that you really do see women breaking through the ceiling in my business. But yes, finally, women are succeeding. And, they're succeeding everywhere. And I've been waiting for this to happen forever. Why did it take so long? Women have been dominating graduate schools for a long time. More women graduate law school and medical school, and there should be more women. Women are very effective leaders. I just read a piece about if you want to really do well in the stock market, get yourself a woman financial advisor. And so, yeah, it's happening and it's a good thing.
So diversity has changed in your industry. Something else that has changed is obviously technology. There was a statistic that said something like 86%, so almost all Americans use digital services to get at least some of their news information. And actually and I imagine it's the same the world over. And that's exaggerated even more when you look at the younger generation. So something like almost half of all 18 to 29-year-old Americans get their news primarily from social media. I don't know what you think of that. That I find scary. That is a scary thought, given all the misinformation and disinformation on social media. And as I'm going to talk about my dad again, Lesley, I grew up in a household where you didn't just watch one news network. My dad flipped between Al Jazeera, France 24, BBC, CNN, CB, all of them. And his theory was you have to sort of get every sort of network will have their own agenda, and you kind of need to see everything to really find out what the full story is. So I personally find it scary that the younger generation use social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, to get their news. What's your take on that, both as a journalist as well as a grandmother?
Yeah, I'm terrified about social media for my grandchildren, terrified. Too many people are believing what they're reading from sites and from blogs and from social media and whatever, getting information that hasn't been checked, that hasn't been vetted. They're just believing it. They're buying it. And even worse, they're just going to the place that they know agrees with them. And it has been obviously extremely harmful for the country and devastating for the news business, just devastating. It's not only, the internet and what you're talking about, social media, has not only been harmful for journalists, but it's been harmful for democracy. It's been harmful for the world. And that's a genie that's out of the bottle. I have no idea how to rein it in. It will have to be reined in. It has to be. Regulation is the answer, but I don't know how the politicians are going to get there. I'm working on a story about China right now. And as you know, Xi has in his mind that their system is competing with our system, that authoritarianism versus the messiness of democracy. And he wants to prove to the world that their system works and that ours doesn't. And, I don't know how many people know that we're in this worldwide competition. I know it, and I'm working on a story about it. It makes it even more acute in my mind. But social media, he's trying to rein it in, and you say, oh my God, he shouldn't be doing that. And you think to yourself, yeah, but shouldn't somebody put a couple of guardrails around what's going on here in this country?
We talk about just pulling on that thread of trust in traditional media. And there are a couple of studies that say trust in traditional media, probably not 60 Minutes, is an all-time low. I'm curious, how do you look at trust in the traditional media and what we can or should do about it?
Trust in the media was a big problem before Donald Trump. He made it worse because he came after us and attacked us with, howitzers almost every day. But we were already suffering. I have to say, in reading a little bit of history about this, that trust in the media has been sort of a roller coaster ride over history. Virtually every president comes to loathe and despise the press because, as a lot of businessmen do. And that's because our job is to uncover what they're trying to keep secret and what they're not doing well. They blame the messenger and they attack us so the public won't believe us. Donald Trump, I asked him once why he comes after us so much. I said, it's boring. You do it every day. It's just so repetitive. And he said, I do it so the public won't believe you when you say negative things about me. All presidents feel that way. I mean, Clinton loathed us, despised us. Even Jimmy Carter came to dislike the press. I also think right now, one of our big problems is that everybody's media, Kennedy's media, Joe Scarborough's media, Rush Limbaugh's media, and I'm media. And we're all in this salad bowl, media. Well, they can't trust them. Of course not. Well, when you say they're biased, well, some of them are avowedly biased. The ones I named, they want you to know where they're coming from. And then when we say we're mainstream, you're media. You can't be trusted. So, there are a lot of reasons for our problem. I have no idea how we can thread our way out of this. It's tough. I came along, as you know, with Watergate. And afterward, we were heroes. So that I went through that period. And then it's been pretty much downhill in terms of the public's trust in us since then.
You just gave us a kind of pretty negative, beat you up approach to what you do every day for decades. So what is perseverance for you? How do you keep going if you're kind of taking it on the chin? You're generally, I think, a very optimistic person. Talk about perseverance.
I work for 60 Minutes and, people do come after us. I've had to have some protection every now and then, but I don't know. It must be like what I told you about being in war zones and being in danger. I've never felt really in danger. And I love what I do. I just love it. I didn't come to 60 Minutes because I was tired with what I was doing. I came to 60 Minutes because they dragged me. They asked me. The wonderful thing that I do is I can cover anything. And I'm going off to do a story on wine, and then I will interview a president. So how do you say I'm discouraged when you have a job like that?
You had a conversation, Lesley, with Judy Woodruff, where she said, once you get into journalism, it's in your blood and you just can't take it out. It is kind of that the secret to what you're saying, that the perseverance isn't an issue because you just are so passionate and believe in getting the truth out, whether it's wine, climate change, politics.
Absolutely. And, I don't know about your business, but we are always meeting deadlines. And when you meet a deadline, you have like an adrenaline rush. So you're almost addicted. It is an addiction, but it's a love. It's a love for this business. And it is a painful moment to think that the public doesn't trust us. This democracy needs us. We're cleansing. We're the cleansing agent. We keep the country from falling into corruption. I think if you just came over to 60 Minutes and just were a fly on the wall for a day, and you would see how committed everybody is. And the layers of checks and the fact checking that goes on, I know you would be impressed. It's a mission.
We'll be right back with Lesley, but first a quick break from Jackie Ross, a managing director in our San Francisco office, about 3 major issues facing businesses and how you can prepare for them.
What are the top critical issues business leaders will face over the next 12 to 18 months? We examined that question in our annual Global Leadership Monitor, and 3 core issues rose to the surface: economic uncertainty, geopolitical risk, and talent and skill shortages, which was seen as the top threat to businesses in the year ahead. Unfortunately, these critical threats also rank among the issues that leaders believe their teams are the least prepared to face. So how can leaders better prepare to tackle these core issues? To deal with economic uncertainty, we found that leaders who engage constructively with digital and sustainability opportunities are better prepared for economic ups and downs. These leaders have realized the importance of driving cohesion and buy-in around long-term goals to build a culture that embraces innovation as an engine of change. To manage geopolitical uncertainty, leaders must engage more deeply in scenario planning to engineer flexibility into their business and operating models. Supply chain disruptions and commodity price volatility require a different approach to risk management and decision-making. And when it comes to talent and skill shortages, the challenge isn't just finding and hiring talent, it's also critical to retain existing talent. Organizations need to ensure they have the capability and capacity for people leadership to create an empowered and purpose-driven workforce. They must also engage next-generation leaders as a key lever in the talent crunch, providing clear growth paths and development plans. To learn more about the 2022 Global Leadership Monitor and how you can prepare your leadership for tomorrow's critical issues, go to russellreynolds.com/insights.
Now, back to our conversation with Lesley. Given the transformation in every aspect of our lives, what's the future of news? Does it become more citizen spontaneous reporting? Is there still a role for the longer form investigative broadcast news? How do you look at the future of the news business?
If you go online today, where all news is, you will see that you can get the long form. You can get all kinds of investigations. You can get deep analysis. You can find what you agree with and what you disagree with. And so I think there's definitely a future for journalism. Here's the problem. When you had broadcasting, which when I came into journalism, broadcasting was beginning its golden age. We're at the end of it, by the way. And the audiences were huge, gigantic. The entire country was watching only 3 stations. And we had, 30 million or more people watching one news show. And so we had money. And it's expensive to produce 60 Minutes. It's extremely expensive because we travel a lot. If you divide it up into small chunks, which is what's going to happen on the internet, the kind of cream of people who came into journalism because there were decent salaries, that's going to go away. And I'm worried about the smartest kids in the class not wanting to be in this profession. That worries me a lot. Nevertheless, kids are flocking, and smart kids and kids who feel a little idealism toward this profession. And idealism is something we all crave in what we do. But I do worry about the model for supporting a family if you're a journalist.
So Morgan Murphy, one of our daughters, graduated from the university in May. Ironically, a media studies major, but more around data analytics and a math minor. So quantitatively looking at what audiences react to what news in what media. She's not going to be in the front of the camera. She's going to be behind it saying, what do people want to hear about and who wants to hear that? What's your view of this more analytical approach to who absorbs what pieces of the media and let's steer it to them?
That's not the school of journalism that I grew up in. I remember Walter Cronkite. He used to lick his finger, stick it up, and say, we don't watch how the wind is blowing. We never do that. We decide what the news is, and we tell it. So we'll decide what the biggest story of the day is, and then we'll report it. And that began to change as journalism became more competitive. News outlets did begin to do polling, surveys. What do people want to hear? In my career, I watched what is news change, depending on who was making the decisions about what is news. I remember once I was covering the White House. Jimmy Carter was president. And my boss, and he called me up because I was the woman. And he said, there's this big story I've just seen come across the wire, that there are something like huge percentage of unnecessary hysterectomies. And he said, should I lead with that? That was monumental. One, to lead with a health story of any kind, but two, to lead with a health story about women. It was a giant moment. It was like 1979, something like that.
Diverse teams make companies more powerful, more effective.
Well, yes, and we haven't had it. And now that we are having it, your eyes open up.
Lesley, we like to end each podcast with some rapid fire questions. And this is where we're going to ask you a series of questions and you respond as quickly as possible, just off the cuff. Ready?
It's all been off the cuff.
Exactly. There you go.
So Lesley, if they made a movie about your life, who would you want to play you?
Who is the sexiest young actress around? How's about Jennifer Aniston? There you go. I gave you an answer. Okay.
What did you want to be when you were a child?
An architect.
What's your hidden talent?
Well, I love to play the piano. I'm terrible at it. Absolutely terrible. I bang and it's awful. I feel sorry for anyone in my apartment. I broke my hand and I haven't been able to play well since, but I still do it. I love to do it. I wouldn't call it a talent, but I would call it kind of a side interest.
A passion.
There you go. When was the last time you were wrong?
3 minutes ago? Oh my God, I'm wrong all the time. My husband, as I mentioned earlier, is handicapped and he has Parkinson's, and it's after he got COVID, it became dramatically more acute. And I'm a caregiver, and the thing that's distressing and wrong is anger. And I'm learning that I'm not alone, which helps. But you get angry and then the guilt is overwhelming, because how could you be angry at someone who can't help himself? I mean, so I'm wrong a lot every day, a lot.
Are you finding a new person in yourself, caring for him?
I am. I would have thought that I would be depressed and brought down by it. And it's strangely, inexplicably the opposite. And I'm a little baffled. I do think there's something in caring for someone. The other side of it makes you feel good in a way. It's strange. So, yeah, there's a lot of downside and then there's this huge upside. And I'm not depressed at all. And that's kind of stunned me. Yeah. He's not depressed either, by the way. Right.
It's a good journey you're on together. More power to you.
Lesley, last question. Where do you get your news from?
I read my news in paper form for the most part. I do go onto the web, obviously, and I keep up, because there are these dings that go on all day long that drive you crazy. But when it dings, you have to go look. But I read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post every day in paper form. I still read Time Magazine and the New Yorker and the Atlantic. I read a lot, and I watch Judy Woodruff at night. Okay. I really like the New York Times Daily Show. I like that a lot. There just isn't enough time in the day. And you add to that emails, which drive me insane. And it takes so much time. Your day just is so full with all this stuff. And then poor Clark is writing a book on top of that. My goodness.
But people should be happy to know that Lesley Stahl is not great at returning email. But if you send her a text, you get an instantaneous, less than 10-word response. So just keep going with that. It's working,
No,
Lesley.
don't tell anybody that. I don't want don't tell them.
Oh, Lesley, I love to give away your secrets. It's okay. But listen, thank you for being here. That's no secret. And what you have seen and experienced, I think many of us have learned from. I think this redefining moments that we seek in these podcasts to have your nurse after COVID say, you were the first patient who'd survived. That would shake me to the core, but you did something different. You chose the priorities that you're going to keep working and stick with your stories. One of the takeaways I'm coming away with here is this sense of what are your priorities? And they may be different than others, but you set your own priorities. You're saying you've never been starstruck by the celebrities, but attracted more by the human, the emotional stories. And I think it comes out in who you are. Also, how you play with interviews, which some of us should learn from, that it's a game. They may not exactly tell the truth. So you prepare yourself, you push, you maneuver. Your reality of the misinformation on the internet, that what comes up on a browser search may not be the truth, but yet you have this optimism and this insight that young people still flock to journalism, to telling the real stories with real facts and double checking them. It's great to hear. It's so important. And finally, your own human emotional story, how you care for your husband in the trials and tribulations, but yet that's who you are. This has been a fantastic discussion. You've been so open and energized as always. And so, we just want to say thank you so much for being part of Redefiners and being willing to be interviewed.
Thank you.
It was fun, and your questions were interesting and challenging, so I had a good time. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Redefiners. For more dynamic insights from leaders from across industries and around the world, listen to Redefiners wherever you get your podcasts.
And to learn more or get in contact with us, visit our website at russellreynolds.com, find us on LinkedIn, and follow us on Twitter at RA on Leadership. See you next time. Do you have a question on leadership, career development, joining a board, or other topics you'd like to ask one of our consultants? Well, now's your chance. Email us at redefiners@russellreynolds.com for an opportunity to have your question answered on the podcast by one of our experts. We'll see you next time on Redefiners.